Thank you, George. Our next guest started out with Lenny Bruce back in the old days when I used to book Lenny on the old show. I used to book this gentleman, too. They played the same clubs, and they were sort of a pair. They each have totally individual styles. Neither influenced the other. They were both totally original. In fact, they both influenced many other comedians. But they were both called by Newsweek and other magazines of the time sick comics. This gentleman, Mort Sahl, and Lenny Bruce, as I say, were described as sick. And, of course, that meant irreverent, outrageous, and, in my personal opinion, extremely funny. I'm delighted to say this man is still not really sick at all, but always very funny and very insightful. He's probably the only real political philosopher we have in modern comedy, at least the leading practitioner of that particular form of the comic arts. Welcome, Mort Sahl. Here he is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Steve put us both on the old Tonight Show, which still had live jazz then. And Lenny and I worked at where the Playboy building is now in the Strip. We worked at the Crescendo and the Interlude. I was in the club upstairs. He was in the big room downstairs. We were the house comedians. We got $200 a week, and we worked there 7 months a year. And people like the Mary Kay Trio and Peggy Lee and Julie London and Count Basie and Ellington would come on, and we'd open for them. That's how we learned to do it, whatever it is that we did and we do. So he was kind of capricious, you know, because we did 3 and 4 shows a night. And I'll give you an example of this. I did about 12 minutes then, so did he, because they saved the time for Peggy Lee or whoever the star was. So he would do like 12 minutes, and, you know, a lot of people now will walk up to me and they'll say, well, if you could say it all in 12 minutes then, why do you do an hour now? Have you lost your discipline? There wasn't as much wrong then. I could cover it in 12 minutes. Anyway, we would wait for the weekends, because L.A. was never a night town, and the big business would come on the weekends. And we had a convention. This is a true story, by the way. Everything I tell you is true, but this is actual. And Lenny had been fighting with Gene Norman, the owner of both clubs, and because he had defamed the owner. Gene used to walk up and down and count the house like owners do, and look for empty tables. There were a lot of them in those days, and nobody knew who we were or what we were doing. So he would then go into the kitchen, Gene, and see how the dinners were coming. And then when he would come out, people would point at him and start to laugh, the owner. And he didn't know why. When he was in the kitchen, Lenny was saying to people, well, you know, the owner here is kind of weird. I just went to the kitchen and caught him embracing a side of beef, you know, and that's the kind of stuff he's doing. So then the owner said he was going to fire him, so Lenny put it in his contract that the owner couldn't talk to him. He had those kind of wars going. And eventually, he came to be represented in these legal battles by the American Civil Liberties Union, which hasn't taken on too many more serious fights than that, in my opinion. And they're the group that tried to get prayer out of the schools. Because the liberals wanted busing and didn't want prayer in the schools, and conservatives wanted prayer in the schools and no busing. And the moderates wanted a compromise whereby there would be busing, or prayer on the bus on the way to the school, I think. Anyway, but Lenny was indifferent all this. So anyway, Gene Norman comes into us one night, and he says to him, we're going to have good business this week because there's a convention of the American Medical Association. So Lenny said, that's going to be very wild because these guys are here without their wives, right? So Lenny goes upstairs, and he starts to talk, and he said something which could be construed as profanity. And there were police there, sitting there. You know, the plainclothes police from the sheriff's office, to see if he swore. And he spotted them, because they had short hair, you know, and white socks. And they looked offended when someone brought them a check. You knew they were cops, you know. So he went into Yiddish. He started to curse in Yiddish, and one of the cops was Jewish. Anyway, they busted him, and he took him to the sheriff's station down in San Vicente. So he called me, and he had a Volvo station wagon then, and he used to get paid every night by Gene Norman. And if he didn't pay him every night, he would take all of the chairs out of the club and put it into the station wagon. This is true. So he called me, and he says to me, he says, listen, man, the ultimate hipster. He says, listen, man, go up and do my show and get the bread and come down here and bail me out. We have done this drill many times, you know. So it was easy because all I had to do was do 12 minutes in front of Peggy Lee and then run upstairs and do his 12 minutes in front of Julie London, and then come downstairs and do my second show and go upstairs and do his second show and then do my third show and his third show and then go to the jail and get him out. in the Volvo, right? So I did the first one and the second one and the first one and the second one. I'm running downstairs after the third show at the interlude, back into the crescendo, and here come the three doctors with the buttons from the convention at the Hilton, you know. That says, hello, my name is Fred, you know, AMA. And these guys are looking for Whiskey, Women, and Vice, which was the ceiling at that time. So they're all reeling like this, and it's doctor grabs me and he says, hey, kid, there's a guy in the other club doing all your material. Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
So one time he came to me and says to me, hey man, I'm really in trouble, Chick, and I really, and I can use $1,500, you know? So I said, Lenny, you got it. So I gave him $1,500. Now, maybe a year went by, and I was in San Francisco, and he was working Basin Street West. And that was right near the end. It was, and Lenny would start his comedy routines, and then all of a sudden he would start talking about the briefs and talking about what happened in court, and the people really didn't know what the hell was happening, you know? But all of a sudden he spots me in the audience and says, oh, cool, man. I just remembered, I owe you money. I owe you $1,500. I got to give you some money, you know? So I says, and I yelled from the audience, I says, don't worry about it. I just finished your act. And I said, no, that's really on my mind. It really bothered me, man. It really bothered me. So he had this Kleenex, and he took some money out, and he put it in the Kleenex and everything else, and he jumped off the stage, and he gave me this Kleenex with the money. Now, I'm not going to look at it. He goes back, and he finishes his act and everything, and I walk out, and he comes running out. I'm by my car, and he says to me, hey, man, he says, it's not the whole $1,500. He says, I'd like to give it to you. He says, but he says, there's some money in there. He says, but I just ran out of Kleenex. If I would have had more Kleenex, it would have been more money.
When the next gentleman is introduced, he's sometimes referred to as a comedian's comedian.